observation one is resolutional analysis. The ACE point is resolution that China, I almost said the United States program, that China should request to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Once again, China should request to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Observation two, or sorry, so the basic point is the framework you should evaluate. This debate the basic framework of net benefits, meaning what demonstrates the most good, net good for the world should win the round. The basic point is the definitions, all definitions are contextual for the resolution. Although look at some background now on observation two on the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. So basically a couple of years ago there was a thing called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It dissolved when the US pulled out, but all the other member countries except for the US created it again under the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership with a few provisions that the US preferred that none of the other ones liked removed, and now they are trying to get that put in place. Specifically what it does is it does a few things. One, it allows preferential access to markets, preferential access to each country's market by the other countries, which means reducing tariffs and unblocking investment into those countries. And additionally, it safeguards labor by imposing higher labor and environmental standards on the countries that are involved in it. The next background subpoint is that China has proposed the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, but it is not nearly as lucrative. It involves the same countries, but none of the other countries like it, so they realize that the CPTPP is actually better. The RCEP is not nearly as lucrative. Thus, the plan is the resolution verbatim. China should request to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. On to solvency. The first solvency point is that I'll get to you after solvency. Yeah. The first solvency point is that the CPTPP has no large market right now, and they need China. China is a huge market, and that means that they will say yes. Specifically, also Australia actually invited China to join when they were initially making the deal in 2017, but China said no. That means that they will definitely say yes to China joining. Yeah, what was your question? Yeah.
Can you name some of the countries that are in the CPTPP
sure.
that aren't in RCEP?
Oh, RCEP hasn't happened yet.
No, it exists.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet. China's proposed it, but it's not actually put in place. Specifically, like you have, countries like Australia, like I said. You also have, let's see, Japan, Malaysia. There's Chile. There are a couple other. Peru. Yeah, Peru. Right, Peru's one of them. There are like a few Latin American and also Pacific Rim countries. Advantage one is trade war. These points you use. The first point is that there's a trade war coming in the status quo specific that China doesn't actually want. Specifically, this is because Trump imposed tariffs on solar panels and washing machines coming from China, and then China retaliated by imposing tariffs on lots of agricultural products going from the U.S. to China. And then Trump will retaliate soon, but hasn't kind of decided what to put the tariff on yet. But specifically, this will escalate to trade war because they will go back and forth, and they'll go back and forth because they've already gone back and forth once. They'll just keep doing it. This leads to a collapse in relations because our relation with China is predicated on trade. We don't really have a good relationship with China except for the fact that we give each other a lot of money and goods all the time. Specifically, these markets are key to our relationship with China. And that collapse of the trade war. These points and links. The first is that Trump is going to feel. First is that Trump's going to see that China joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership as a way to get back at China because then he knows that if the U.S. joins it, then China isn't going to be able to put tariffs on them anymore. So he says it's going to beat China in the trade war. Specifically, this means that Trump is going to join the CPTPP, and also because specifically he knows that once he joins the CPTPP, then it completely destroys China's ability to tariff the U.S. And then that feels like that's a good thing for his reputation. Specifically, what this means is we're going to avert the trade war, and also we're just going to increase the general for international free trade between the countries. And specifically, this is good because it's the impact. Specifically, this is trade war is critical to will completely destroy the economy now. Specifically, the trade war, our economy is entirely based, or is largely based on trade with China. And when we go to see a full-scale trade war, we're going to see a huge shortage of supply coming to the U.S. Specifically, that U.S. consumers rely heavily on Chinese trade. And when we see an increase in tariffs, what we're going to see is that first of all, it puts huge strain on the United States economy. What we see is in 2003, 2004, when Bush imposed steel tariffs on steel coming from China. What we saw is that we lost about $4 billion in wages and several 100,000 jobs. This is just on a bigger scale. That this can actually collapse the economy. When we see an economic collapse, what we're going to see is that there's persistent unemployment as employers are unable to get the products from China for a reasonable price. They're not able to then pay their people a decent wage because they can't sell them at a reasonable price. No one wants to buy them. This of course causes a seize up of this causes a supply seize up, which means that inevitably what we're going to see is an economic collapse as people are unable to pay off the debts that they've taken out because they aren't getting enough in wages. What this means is that once that happens, then we see people defaulting on their debt. We see a repeat of the 2008 bubble, essentially in addition to a different area of the economy where people default on their debt. debt, and then no one wants to lend out any money, and so there's no free capital, and like no one, then all of a sudden like no one wants to buy anything, and the economy falls apart. This means this like leads to persistent structural. This leads to like persistent unemployment, structural decrease in the quality of life, and persistent poverty. As people are unable to get out of the bubble or out of the recession because it's very difficult to get out, and no one's going to just start buying things automatically. The second advantage is Latin America. Basic point is the first is that Latin America has been trapped in developing stage for a long time, and specifically the collapse of the second subpoint is that the collapse of Venezuela has been bad for the region. Specifically, there are a lot of refugees from Venezuela who are trying to go to other countries, which is a huge burn on those economies specifically. But additionally, the collapse of Venezuela means that the economy of the Latin America region is not doing very well right now, and they have not been able to break out of the developing stage and become like first world countries. The third subpoint is that China wants to invest in Latin America, but is been stuck currently because of a lot of treaties that they made and like foreign relations deals that mean they can't invest. The biggest point is the links. The first is that this allows Chinese investment in Latin America because they want to do it, but they haven't been able to yet. And the second is that this liberalizes Latin American markets and lifts a lot of them out of poverty. And the third is that this signals future investment and confidence. Specifically, that Chinese investment is key to lifting out of poverty. They need foreign people who are willing to take a chance on them and invest in them. No. The C point is the internal links. The first is that we see that Latin America is going to switch to a more export-based economy. They're going to be able to export more. They're going to be able to generate more wealth for their people, and they're exporting a lot. That means that they're taking a lot of money back home, and they're able to reinvest it. And the second is that this is going to mean businesses, individual businesses are going to invest more domestically as they see that the economy is getting stronger. This means that the economic crisis in Latin America right now is averted, and this leads to effects of the economy, like specifically that the Latin American economy is going to be able to have long-term solvency and lift themselves out of the cycle of poverty they're trapped in right now, which is another form of status quo. Advantage to use Chinese labor. The eighth point is the first is that there are bad standards in the school and the labor conditions in China are really bad. Specifically, there have been many people lifted out of poverty by Chinese market liberalization, but there are also many who are pushed down to lift up the others. That there are a lot of menial level workers who are working in factories who have very low quality of life and are unable to get out of that cycle. These points, the first is that the increase in labor laws that come from this trade agreement mean that the quality of labor quality of life of the laborers in China is going to increase, and this also signals the Chinese willingness to restrict labor conditions in the future, which means that they're going to be more likely for businesses to just move to that direction anyway. This means that we're basically going to see a direct quality of life increase on the impacts level. We're going to see an increase in health of these workers, as they don't have to work like crazy long hours for very low wages. They're able to actually lift themselves out of poverty and achieve long-term economic gains.
What's my saying? Oh, did I set up? Oh,
No, you didn't.
That's fine.
It's fine.
All right. The orders can be 3 off, and then the affirmative case order. Sure. That aerial map.
Ooh.
All thing on computer.
Okay. Yeochina proudly read. Title and text. The government of the People's Republic of China should request to join the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. We'll explain more about what RCEP is on the disadvantage. A couple of arguments here. First of all, Japan is the main country that is leading the RCEP right now. They're the main country spearheading it, and China's not currently a member. This partnership is much broader, but Japan really wants China to join because it would bring a massive economy into the fold and would allow the agreement to become a lot bigger and allow Japan to expand its intellectual property claims that are part of the agreement to other countries. So Japan's definitely a fan of China joining. The problem is that this is mutually exclusive with the affirmative for 2 reasons. First of all, it's mutually undesirable. If China joins, tries to join both the RCEP and the CPTPE, Japan will reject it because it doesn't want them to join both, right? It just wants them to join one that Japan has control over. It doesn't want them to actually expand their challenge Japanese hegemony. Second, the argument is that there are different regulations at play here. For example, it's legally impossible to be in both because they both have different regulations about the level of labor laws, different regulations about intellectual property, different regulations about what kinds of tariffs you can set up. So they're the 2 legal frames are incompatible, yes.
So then how is Japan in both right now?
Japan
is not.
Japan is not in the CPTPP. It's not. So we'll explain which countries are and which aren't in which agreement in a second.
They might be signatories, but they're not part of the CPTPP.
Okay. On the IC, so next is their disadvantage. First of all is the uniqueness. The CPTPP and Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership are both competing for China to join them right now. Ace point is that the RCEP includes all of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, so basically countries in Southeast Asia that are not part of the CPTPP, basically not part of the app, right? It also includes India and Japan, which are both not involved in the affirmative. This means it's a much broader agreement. This adds up to $50 trillion of global GDP, or 40% of the entire world economy, which means this agreement is much, much, much larger, much broader than the affirmative. The second argument is that Japan currently heads RCEP right now, because they've basically taken on all the burden of like organizing legal architecture and have basically spearheaded it. They're one of like the most developed economies involved. This is a couple of implications. First of all, they're passing and basically forcing policy that is very similar to the US. So they're basically integrating like intellectual property claims, integrating labor rights claims into it, and B, they sort of asserted their dominance over this agreement. Next is the links. One, the request to join basically betrays Japan and the bloc allies because there's like a huge amount of power there. Singapore requested to join the CPTPP, but was basically publicly pressured by Indonesia and Japan to withdraw from. So we see empirically when other countries have tried to join those partnerships, Japan and other countries that are in charge of RCEP will just bully them and push them out of joining, so they convince them to join RCEP, which means it's impossible for China to join both. Second, joining creates two competing trade blocs that are basically trying to go to dominance like over the region. There's basically like RCEP, and then there's CPTPP, which they basically don't want those to happen. It's also legally impossible for countries to really function super well with them. Next, in the internal links. First of all, requesting to join basically increases significantly, like the what's this thing?
Tensions significantly.
Oh yeah, basically requesting to join increases tensions really significantly because of the threat to econ security. Japan seeing its dominance in the region threatened by China in a way that it isn't before. Also, the Japanese economy is based heavily on intellectual property, which is not protected under the AFT. Right, the AFT is a really, really watered down version of the Trans-Pacific Partnership because that was too unpopular. The thing is that intellectual property claims are included in RCEP, which means the agreement is a lot stronger on those fronts. And Japan's actually able to protect its intellectual property claims in countries like China that are notorious for violations of this. Yes.
So how exactly does passing the plan reduce Japan's ability to protect intellectual property?
Sure, because it trades off with RCEP, right? If you pass the plan and China joins the watered down version of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it can no longer join RCEP for all the reasons we've explained, right? And RCEP has much stronger intellectual property protections. So there's a lot better intellectual property protections in the world than negative. So Japan sees this as a threat. Second, joining is basically a direct affront to Japan. Japan is no longer comfortable with China using IP because it's basically in a locked-in trade pact with locked in basically a trade war. The impact of this is trade war. You can basically this competition challenges security with Japan, and Japan's going to do things like increase tariffs and hurt U.S. trade. Also, Japan's going to pressure other countries in the region to do the same thing because Japan has a massive amount of influence over them. It can just threaten to kick other countries out of RCEP. So Japan's basically going to be able to pressure a bunch of other countries to launch a trade war with China, which will be negative for the same reasons. What was the second one? Yeah. Next is the third disadvantage. The third disadvantage is about, or the second disadvantage is about labor rights. First of all, the affirmative plan basically includes factories and basically increases factories, plantations, and lots of other buildings in places like Malaysia, Vietnam, and Brunei that have really terrible labor rights. Second, it's a lot with the TPP. It becomes a lot more profitable for these countries to do trade in order to low barriers to trade, and that they basically want to build more factories because it's a lot cheaper now. Then this leads to the internal exhibit. This leads to an increase in human trafficking and slave labor, which is empirically shown because when these countries have decreased their trade barriers in the past, they basically go out and enslave a bunch of people from farms and force them to work in factories, but they have even worse working conditions than they did as farmers. This leads to a massive amount of violence, a massive amount of dehumanization, which is a serious impact that destroys quality of life for people in a lot of these countries. Also, the RCEP does not have this problem because RCEP is a much stronger version of the TPP. Because RCEP has much stronger labor rights protections than the CPTPP, which basically has little to no labor rights protections right now. Next on the case. The biggest problem with the first advantage is that the trade war arguments between Trump are all bluster. Trump is basically owned by and controlled by billionaires in America and companies like Boeing that have massive factories in China, right? All these companies really want trade between the US and China to stay open, which means that basically the people that are donating to Trump, the people that are donating to Republicans and Democrats that control Congress would never ever want this to happen, right? They would pay tons of money to stop trade barriers from increasing. They really, really love open trade with China because that is a massive foundation of the US economy. Which means that the corporate influences that control our government, and that Trump has no incentive to ever actually escalate this. Second, this is all bluster. The fact that Trump says this does not mean that he's going to do this, right? Their link evidence here is super weak. Trump says a lot of things and doesn't do a lot of them, like any politician. Probably uniquely true for Trump because he's made a bunch of threats about tariffs since the beginning of his campaign and has not yet followed through on any of them. So this scenario for trade war is probably unlikely. We control a much more likely scenario for trade war than they do. Next on the second advantage. Actually, sorry, down on the impact level of this advantage. First of all, tariffs between the US and China right now are already super low. They're basically 0%. They're functionally really low. Yes, China increased it on like $50 billion worth of goods, but the average tariff between the US and China is like on the order of like a couple percentage points, which is tiny. It's really insignificant. Then they say this caused a $4 billion decrease in the size of the US economy. The US economy is $17 trillion. This means that their impact is a couple orders of magnitude too low to even have an impact that we can actually measure. This is like smaller than noise. Next one, there's second advantage about Latin America. First of all, they don't isolate any specific legal barriers that would prevent the US from investing in these countries. Second, these countries can just join RCEP in the future. There's no reason why that can't happen. Third, there's no reason why the US can't just invest in these countries, which is doing the status quo. There are tons of US banks that are already investing in Latin America that are probably resolving a lot of these issues. Fourth, not that many Latin American countries are in the TPP to begin with, are in either the TPP or RCEP. It's like Chile and Argentina. Most of like the largest economies in Latin America are not even in either agreement to begin with, because it mostly affects like the Pacific, right? So the largest, most important economies in Latin America, especially Venezuela, which they talk about, would not even be covered by either deal. So it's pretty irrelevant. The size of the link they control is so marginal. Next, in the labor rights argument, our labor rights disadvantage, first of all, turns this because the CPTPP has very weak labor laws. The entire reason the affirmative agreement exists is basically because the TPP was too controversial and people didn't like the US trying to bully them. This means that like the protections for labor are super weak and a lot better under RCEP.
Negative or graph.
One second.
Yep.
Start time now. The first argument on the counterclaim is the permutation. There's no reason that China can't join both the RCEP and the CPTPP. The first argument is that Japan is in both. You can look it up. Japan was one of the original members of the TPP and they're part of the CPTPP. The second argument is that countries can be in multiple trade agreements at all the time, right? The US is in NAFTA and we were in TPP before we decided to pull out. Then they say that RCEP is better because like Japan is really important. But the critical argument here is that Japan is too export-based to be starting a trade war with anyone, right? That its economy is basically entirely based on exports, which means that it can't risk a short-term loss in exports, which means that there's nothing specifically key about RCEP. The next argument is that they tell you that TPP like talks about plantations and factories. That's why it's good, right? RCEP doesn't actually have very good labor standards on those. It leaves them out, and that's why China is interested in it. Basically, RCEP is the trade agreement that's made for China to join. CPTPP is not, and that probably means the trade deal that is not tailored to China is probably going to be the better one because it's probably going to constrain China's labor restrictions.
Yeah, but they say that Japan will say no because they want to pressure China, but it's such a huge market.
They say that Japan will say no because they want to pressure China. Japan doesn't have the power to do that. It's such a huge market, they won't be able to say no. All the other countries in CPTPP already want China. Okay, on the first disadvantage, they say that like a request to join is a betrayal to China's allies. Like China doesn't have to worry about that. They're the biggest economy in the region. And second thing, we tell you that Japan doesn't really have any power to do anything because they're totally export-based. They can't start a trade war with anyone. The idea that a trade war between Japan and China is likely just doesn't make any sense. There hasn't. You can probably look into the status quo where there is a budding trade war between the U.S. and China, or at least an increase in tariffs, whereas there is not between Japan and China because Japan has no interest in it. They are not comparable economies. They talked about how there's no like IP protections, but that like that's not unique. That's happening in the status quo. Japan doesn't care about it. Yeah.
Also, like they say that it happened with Singapore, but Singapore's tiny.
Right. They say it happened with Singapore, but Singapore is tiny. Like comparing Singapore and China is ridiculous. And they don't really give you any impacts under this except that of the trade war. But the trade war is totally ridiculous because Japan is export-based and there's no trade war brewing in the status quo, and you can be in both. So there's really no offense for them on this disad. On labor rights, they talk about how the act includes factories and plantations. That's why the CPTPP is good. Like the labor protections were part of the reason that Barack Obama wanted to be in the TPP, and that was part of the things that they did not get rid of. Like, yeah, they got rid of the intellectual property stuff, but they did not get rid of the labor protections, and that's why it's specifically key that China goes into this one. RCEP is tailored for China by having less labor protections, right? Think about it. If you want China to join your trade agreement, you probably aren't going to have very strict labor protection. That's probably another reason as to why the CPTPP is going to be better for labor rights.
They're just wrong that it doesn't have labor protections.
Yeah, they're just wrong that it doesn't have labor protections. They say that labor rights leads to human trafficking, so that's a turn, right? If we actually are able to address those issues, that means that the CPTPP is better. And finally, like, they don't explain how in the status quo, manufacturing is not going to be a thing in Malaysia, right? That's completely non-unique anyway. On the first advantage, they're going to lose this debate because they can see that there is a very good chance that the United States will join the CPTPP as a result of China joining. If we can beat the link arguments they make on this argument, we win that argument, and that argument is going to be of a greater magnitude than any argument in this debate. So their first response is that Trump is owned by companies. First of all, one of the first things he did as president was screwed Boeing out of a deal, which means that he's probably not owned by Boeing. The second response is that everyone has gotten really mad at him over tariffs, right? They freaked out after the first steel tariff, and now we've put tariffs on thousands of Chinese goods, right? So the fact that so that means right off the bat that he's willing to do things that the people around him don't want him to do. And the second argument there is that it's very easy for him to do this because he can create tariffs without congressional authority. The CSAT point is that Congress is actually basically unable to do most of his tariffs because the president is basically in charge of conducting foreign policy, which means that if there's any risk that Trump doesn't care enough about his corporate backers that he will do a trade war, this is the most likely trade war scenario in the status quo. They say that the U.S. economy is too big for a trade war with China to matter. However, we do a ton of trade with China, and China owns almost all of our debt, which means that trade with China is hugely important. Secondly, as Ben tells you in the first speech, we're really dependent on Chinese imports, and that means that, and he told you that in 2003, 2004, when we imposed steel tariffs on China, there was a decrease in imports from China, and the result of that decrease of imports from China was thousands of jobs were lost, and billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of jobs were lost, and billions of dollars of wages were lost, which means that even if these tariffs on China aren't very high percentage values, they still have enormous economic effects because we import so much stuff from China, right? That means that the trade war that is happening, that is basically already escalating into the status quo, is possible, and it doesn't require double-digit tariff values on every single good for it to matter. So that means that, if we win the argument that Trump cares about China trade, then we win the argument that the U.S. joins the TPP. Basically, we tell you that this is the way that Trump joins the TPP. And in fact, it can actually function independently, right? Because here's the logical chain. Trump sees that China has joined the CPTPP. Trump has said he wants to stop getting screwed over by China in trade. Trump realizes that by the U.S. joining the CPTPP, it gains preferential access to Chinese markets and thus cannot be hit with tariffs by China. Therefore, he fills his biggest campaign promise and actually does something that would be like a net win for the U.S. on trade.
They say that Trump says a lot and doesn't do much, but he already imposed tariffs.
Right, they say Trump says a lot and doesn't do much, but he already imposed tariffs. He pushed tax reform through. This is a line about Trump that just isn't true. So yeah, that means that this is the biggest impact in this debate because one, we avoid a trade war between the U.S. and China, and two, we long-term increase the freedom of trade between U.S. and China, which means that we're able to do exports and imports more cheaply, which means that there's greater profits in both countries. Since these are the two biggest economies in this round, that's basically going to be the biggest impact in this round. On the Latin American side, they say that there is no legal inability for the U.S. to invest in Latin America right now. Guess what? You got your link wrong. We talked about China, how China is basically unable to invest in Latin America because there are trade barriers, but specifically by joining the CPTPP, they would be able to join. They say that these countries should join RCEP, but one, RCEP is intended to be to give China hegemony in East Asia, basically. It's not about Latin America, so it's unlikely that they would even be accepted to join. And the second argument is that RCEP's labor protections aren't very good, so it's better for Latin American countries to join the CPTPP. They say that there aren't very many Latin American countries in the CPTPP right now, but because they've conceded our link chain, there's a pretty obvious logical analysis that if the CPTPP allows China to invest money in Latin America, and that allows Latin American economies to do better, that other Latin American countries would join the CPTPP, which increases market liberalization overall, and increases Latin America's ability as a region to get out of the developing phase. They pretty much drop the impact level here, right? We talk about how there's cyclical poverty in Latin America as a result of the lack of investment, and we also tell you that this could be solved by the increased domestic business confidence in Latin America, and that both of these things could alleviate the cyclical poverty that hurts millions of people there.
Yes, the U.S. is investing already, but that doesn't mean there's not poverty.
Right. The U.S. is investing already, but that doesn't mean there's not already poverty. China investing could do more. And again, this is also one of the biggest arguments in this debate because it involves countries that are not already part of a trade agreement and are not already being invested in by China. On the Chinese labor argument, they basically say that the CPTPP is weak. However, we told you that the CPTPP actually has strong labor standards. That's one of the reasons that first world countries decided to agree to it. We told you that RCEP is tailored to China, and they also, which means that it's probably going to have weaker labor standards. And they also dropped the argument that when Chinese businesses see that the government is willing to impose labor standards, they're going to move by themselves to make labor standards better.
You simply can see it on the background that has labor standards.
They can see that on the background that it has labor standards.
Okay. The order is going to be Counterplan Trade War DA1, followed by,
Sorry, when you say trade war, you mean advantage one?
sorry, disadvantage one. I'm going off, so Counterplan DA, followed by case and order.
It's just going to be the same order. As
Yeah.
Okay, so netting them out.
Yeah, netting that. Yeah. Is anyone not ready? There's a difference between being a signatory to something and being part of something. A lot of these countries that are talking about are signatories. On the Wikipedia page, they have the signatory list, not the member list. That's where they're getting all of their information from. The issue over here is that Japan is actually only part of is only part of RCEP, but not part of the CPTPP. That's really problematic because of the legal barriers that exist. They say that it is part of both, it is signatories to both. Being a signatory means you want something to be proposed and discussed in the United Nations. It's really meaningless. The United States is a signatory to this Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, but they're never going to ratify that. Being a signatory is meaningless, literally. That means that the arguments that they make that you can be both because Japan clearly is really just flawed because it doesn't understand the legal implications that are prohibiting that from happening. That takes up the first argument that says that Japan is both. The second argument that they say is that it is probably better for them to be both because Japan is going to want China to be part of this. The issue is that China wants to be top dog at its own thing right now. That's why they're going for the CPTPP. The CPTPP has been gutted after Obama pulled out of it, or after Trump pulled out of it, and then it got revitalized. And China has been making a significant pressure, and these countries that were primarily manufacturing based put a lot of pressure in order to make sure that there weren't strong labor regulations in there, which is why CPTPP is in line with China and not in line with Japan, which is primarily an intellectual property-based economy. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, if China likes CPTPP so much, why did they reject to join it?
Yeah, they never asked to join it. I don't know. There was part of different time, but China's goals are just very much in line with CPTPP and not in line with what Japan thinks. Go into the rest of the counterplan proper. They say that RCEP doesn't have good labor standards. We say that this is just empirically denied by the fact that Japan, a primarily intellectual property-based organization, has put a lot of good labor laws there to make sure that their other competitors in their region are less competitive. In that sense, the second argument they make is that they are losing out on such a huge market, but Japan doesn't really care that much about, Japan would be happy to have China as part of them, but because they have so many huge economies as part of it, like India or Indonesia, which control a lot of trade, the importance that they have, the huge markets that they say, is not a super relevant. The second argument is that the reason that they would be angry if China were to not join it is because of this intellectual property threat. Japan's economy is primarily based on intellectual property. They are right when they say that they don't export a lot of goods. They export a lot of ideas. They export a lot of software and things like that. So that intellectual property is challenged under if it's placed in China because they don't have the same intellectual property restrictions and intellectual property protections as you do in RCEP. Go on to the DA.
Also point out that Japan is a super right-wing government. So
Okay, yeah. The first argument that says it's not going to be viewed as a betrayal because of the biggest economy and they can't just be angry at the biggest economy. The problem is that while China is localized the biggest economy, the bloc that Japan has formed as part of RCEP is huge. It's 40% of global's economy. It's got India as part of it. It's got Singapore as part of it, which controls the Strait of Malacca, which controls all of the oil trade to the entire world. It has Indonesia as part of it. It is a huge organization that is not scared of just China standing as one country. The second argument that they say is it's non-unique that the IP protections are low everywhere, but the issue is that IP protections can be high if they were to be joining RCEP. They're low definitely under CPTPP, but this non-unique that you're making here doesn't really make any sense when we're talking about joining organizations with high or low intellectual property protections. The next argument you say is that Singapore is tiny. We say that Singapore controls the Strait of Malacca, which is responsible for getting all the oil that is in Indonesia out to the rest of the world. That is super important because if pressuring Singapore was super important because that changes the port restrictions on taxation, which changes the global price of oil. So then being able to get Singapore as part of them signifies that they have a huge amount of wedge swing because Singapore is a really strong bargaining chip with their location, which means that it's clear that there's a huge amount of bargaining power that they have.
Also, all the countries are on Japan's side right now. Like, they convince Indonesia.
Yeah, like all these countries are on Japan's side right now. They have got 40% of the world's GDP. Japan is huge. So China going against them right now is seen as like a huge screw you to this entire bloc that has been formed, which Japan is not going to be taking lightly to. The final argument theory is that there's no war brewing in the status quo, which means that there's no uniqueness to generate offense off our trade war advantage. But our argument here is that the uniqueness comes as a result of them turning away from the CPTPP. You can look to Singapore, where they probably threatened Singapore pretty heavily with like tariffs or other restrictions or other less preferable things if they didn't join RCEP, which then caused them to change. There's a lot of things there's a lot of steps that Japan is able to take in order to take control of that. Japan probably will take control of that because they have a very right-wing government with Shinzo Abe, who's very concerned about protectionism, which means from an internal politics standpoint, the path of the politics is most likely to falls on the side of the negative. And, yeah. Yeah. Additionally, when you're evaluating the two trade war scenarios side by side, if you're just to do that real quick, on the impact levels, the impact that they read is $4 billion of steel. You can extend Adams' analysis that $4 billion is really nothing in the whole bucket of American trade, because American trade is $17 trillion, so any small decrease on the billions of scale is really, really meaningless, and the United States is going to eat the loss. That means when you're evaluating the impacts in terms of magnitude, we are way ahead in the impact debate. All right, let's go into trade war proper. Adams says the billionaires are controlling Trump, and then they say that no, that's not happening because A, he screwed Boeing over, and 2, because of steel tariffs. This is really problematic. A, because Boeing is just a really small company, and the thing that he did there was like screw them out of some tiny thing that like affected like a couple, like 100 workers. It was like a publicity stunt more than anything else. Really, it doesn't really reveal more about his like actual intentions as president, which in fact supercharges the blustering argument that we're making, where Trump just says a lot of stuff but then doesn't really follow through on it because he doesn't make any actual tangible changes. He just says a lot and then doesn't really do anything when he does things. The second argument you say is on steel tariffs, but you can cross-apply the analysis where we say that steel tariffs aren't really a huge deal in this whole scope of like American trade, and this is probably not a ton of things. Additionally, just like extend his warrant. You can look at the people Trump surrounds himself with. You have Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil. The head of FAA is a previous head of like an aviation company. I forget exactly which one. Like there are a ton of people that Trump has surrounded himself with that are part of his business. Network, which means that the type of people that he's talking to, the type of interest that he's getting like fed in his ear, are people that are interested in making sure that the United States remains competitive. That is really good because Trump is very susceptible to this type of influence. Trump doesn't know a lot about foreign policy, so he leans very heavily on Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State. He doesn't know a lot about trade wars, so he leans heavily on his Secretary of Commerce. He leans heavily on these people around him who have interests in making sure that these trade barriers don't go up. I'm sorry, I don't have time. The second argument on blustering. We say that Trump does a lot. They say that he doesn't do a ton by the fact that he imposed tariffs. A, you can cross-apply my analysis where I say that he imposed, like the tariffs that he imposed are like really meaningless and marginal, and they weren't actually like a strong gesture. That's why you haven't seen any strong reaction from China, because if they were actually meaningful tariffs, China would have reacted significantly. Additionally, like even just domestically, where the things are most proximal, he hasn't done a ton. He said he's going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. That hasn't happened. All these things mean that Trump's ability to do things is like really bad. So let's just zoom out. In terms of warrant level analysis, we're talking about the internal like thought process of the Trump administration and the things he's empirically shown to have done in the past. They're just talking about like really high level things that like he like screwed Boeing and steel tariffs, that they're much less likely to be true when you're talking about the context of how Trump acts. Additionally, when we have stuff on their main offense, on the main sheet of offense that is really tiny, it's just $4 billion compared to like trade with like huge amounts of intellectual property going back and forth. It's just really problematic. Now go on to their other Latin America and China labor advantages. The arguments that we make here are pretty similar, that labor rights are really good in RCEP on the China labor advantages. They're strong standards. You can just look those up. That's like true. On Latin America, we say that they isolate specifically Chile and Argentina as the countries that are part of CCPPP. Argentina is primarily involved in banking, and Chile is primarily involved in precious metals, both of which are industries that China has no interest in. They're interested in rare earth minerals, which are in Venezuela, which is not part of the CPTPP, which means that there's no movement to move into the CPTPP because the countries that are part of it aren't interested. China's not interested in. Cool.
Okay. The order is going to be an overview, weighing impacts, this is going to be most of the speech, and then we'll go into the AC flow to extend specific pieces of defense. Is everybody ready? Okay. First, on the weighing debate, they do not do a lot of impact or link level weighing in their speech. You should not allow them to do any weighing in the last speech because these arguments are non-verifiable. Since we have no 2 in R and can't respond to them, you should not vote on non-verifiable arguments because they prevent possibly a lot of good adjudicated debate. Also, this means that the AF would win literally every round when they get new offense because they could blow up any marginal amount of offense we can't predict, and we have which we were able to prove. The fact that they didn't do link and impact weighing in their speech is a huge problem for them. They should have done that earlier. I'm going to do all of that analysis now. This round is messy, and there are 3 impacts. The first is trade war, Latin America, and labor rights. Here's how the scenario of the negative where China joins RCEP is better than the scenario where China joins the CPTPP. First, on the trade war scenario for RCEP, we have done a lot of analysis of Trump that shows that there's a strong link in the trade war with China, and that the Japanese government really values RCEP. It thinks it's super important. It really wants to develop its impact, and would be happy to let China join it if China wants to concede to Japan's thing. But if they also try to join CPTPP, this trades off because Japan will just kick them out of it. They say this is happening. Japan literally wrote the law, right? Like they can just kick out whoever they want. Also, they've been empirically super successful, and here's just all this analysis for you. The problem is that Japan is a very right-wing government that is pretty anti-China and would like to have this in them if China's willing to concede. But if China tries to make this difficult, and China tries to fight with them, Japan will just kick them out, right? It's a pretty narrow edge here that they just have not they have not shown, right? We have a really strong link into this. Japan-China trade is pretty significant, and trade war between those countries would lead to a massive increase in poverty and structural violence against the poor, which is the analysis that we did in our first speech. In contrast, their link into trade war is really tenuous. First of all, they say that Trump's speeches about how he's going to increase tariffs on China are they just take it at face value. And here's just a lot more specific analysis of why Trump has super strong intent to do this. Also, they say that Trump can just set whatever tariffs he wants. That's not true. Tariffs are taxes. They're done by Congress, right? That's just not how it works.
Also, point of order. Yeah, you never said that tariffs have to be done by Congress before. And
I thought that was in your speech.
Yeah, that's normal ways of meeting the argument. It's that's not. They're not done. That's just false.
I'm pretty sure that was in your speech.
It's okay.
Okay, cool. That's okay. Yeah. Also, you should just not take this at face value, right? Also, the worst part of this is when you get to the impact level of this debate. The impact they gave you at their very first speech is $4 billion and a couple 100,000 jobs. You should hold them to that. Monthly job generation in the US is over 100,000 jobs per month, right? $4 billion is a tiny percentage of the entire $17 trillion economy. Also, tariff trade barriers between China and the US right now are super low. They're basically 0%, or 1 or 2%. You can look at it. The average tariff between China and the US is really small. All China's done is increase tariffs on a few specific goods to play their political base. There's no reason why we would actually expect them to launch into a trade war. Even if they're right that Trump is going to escalate this and goes against all the businesses that are funding his party and funding all of his party members in Congress. Even if for some reason he manages to break it through against all that pressure, China would probably not have incentive to escalate the war much further because China also cares about China-US trade, right? There's probably not a huge incentive to escalate because this trade is so massive. In contrast, the trade between Japan and China is a lot smaller, and the Japanese government is a lot more rational, and they do not have these same political constraints. So it would be much more likely for a trade war to break out between those two. Next, on the other 2 impacts, there are a couple key pieces of defense that they're just not analyzing. There's the only possible net benefits to CPTPP versus RCEP are the Latin America arguments and the labor arguments. First, in the Latin America arguments. They misconstrued our U.S. argument. The argument is not that that China can invest in Latin America. The argument is that other countries that aren't China don't have the same legal barriers that China does, which they've conceded. The argument is that if there's so many opportunities in Latin America, the U.S. government will just invest in them, and the U.S. government and U.S. companies have done a ton of investment in Latin America, which is why there's empirically an increase in Latin American GDP and status quo. The status quo solves. Why is China uniquely key to Latin America? Other countries can invest that don't have these legal barriers. This argument is not answered. Also, they can see that there are only 2 countries that are actually in the CPTPP, which are on the Pacific, they're Chile and Argentina, small percentage of the economy, not even the countries we're talking about Venezuela. Next, on the labor laws, this is a wash. There's no way for you to evaluate this because the vote said that the protections are worse. If anything, err on our side, because we've shown you that the CPTPP is just a really watered down version of an agreement, whereas RCEP is something dictated by Japan at the beginning and not well done.
Okay, the order is just going to be the counter plan, then advantage 1, then disadvantage 1.
Okay, no overview?
Oh, sorry, yeah, overview first. Okay. All right. Is anyone not ready? Start my time.
Yeah.
Now.
We're going to be winning this debate on two levels. The first is if you buy that permutation, then we're winning because we call it all their offense, because literally all their offense relies on China not joining RCEP and not actually from China joining the CPTPP, which means that if we can permutate and China can join both, then they have no offense. The only offense flows affirmative. There's no chance that they will win the round. But the second way we're going to win is that even if you don't buy the permutation, the plan is still going to be better than the counterplan because the economy scenario that we read because the economy scenario on the first advantage is going to outweigh the economy scenario on the first disadvantage. First on the counterplan. So the first thing they say here is that Japan is a signatory of CPTPP, not a member. Well, guess what? No one's a member of any of these yet. They're only signatories because none of these things have been put in place yet. Okay? You can't be a member of any of these agreements because there's only been a signatory process so far. Right? There's a big signing in March, and that's because it hasn't actually been put into place. That doesn't mean Japan doesn't intend to be part of the CPTPP. In fact, Japan was a huge reason why the CPTPP got revived after the US pulled out and it fell apart. But Japan really wants the CPTPP, and they also want RCEP. They are a member of both, and there are a lot of other countries that are also members of both. That's another thing they concede that there are other countries that are members of both. But the next thing is that they say that that RCEP does have stronger labor laws, but no, it doesn't. RCEP doesn't have stronger labor laws because it's made for China. But actually, wait, the labor laws don't even matter though, because they kicked that, we're also kicking that. So, but anyway, Japan. Next, they say that Japan doesn't care about China, but yes, they do because they can have more money, right? China's a huge economy. Now they say that this thing about how they already have 40% of the world's economy, but that includes China because guess what? China is already China is an intended member of RCEP. That's what that includes. China's already included in that group. But additionally, even if you don't buy that, even if you think that it's just the other countries, they still care about China because China is an even bigger economy. Specifically because China is such a huge market. China has a lot of there's a huge amount of exporting that can go to China. I mean that is why Japan likes it. Additionally, Japan has no reason to cause beef with China, but also the perming functions because look at this world. China joins the RCEP, then China joins the CPTPP. That functions. There's no reason that anyone says no.
The links are based on China not joining RCEP. That means that the status quo should have triggered the DISAD already.
Right. The links are based on China not joining RCEP, which means the status quo should have triggered the links to the DISAD anyway, which means that this is completely non-unique. Because if China not joining RCEP triggered the DISAD, then why wouldn't it already happen? Yeah.
This is a new argument in the. So this argument about status quo should have triggered the disadvantage already is new in the PMR. There was no articulation about how the status quo has any impact on the directionality of the impact and the disadvantage.
This is just completely new.
Yeah, so in my MG I talked about how the uniqueness shows that there's no trade war brewing between Japan and China. And
that's right. On the disadvantage, China specifically says there is no trade war right now, and that's because the DISAD is untrue.
That was also shadow stated it wasn't the 2%.
Okay, Japan. Anyway, yeah, let's resume. Next thing they say is intellectual property. This is actually a huge reason why Japan will want China to join, even if they join CPTPP, because Japan really cares about intellectual property. And right now, there aren't restrictions on intellectual property being put on China. But that means that even if they join CPTPP, they will still want trade with China that includes intellectual property laws. In fact, if China comes to them after joining the CPTPP and says, we want to trade with you and we want you to impose your intellectual property laws on us, they will say, yes, of course they will, because they still want that trade with China with intellectual property laws. Next, they say that there's they say that there are no strong regulations in the CPTPP, or that they all say no. But here's the thing: is that China actually, or that Australia offered China to join, and they said no. Which is which proves that that's not true because China wants them to join. Next they say the same thing about can't do weighing in the PMR. That's totally BS. Okay, of course we can do weighing in the PMR. We can do weighing in both of the voter speeches. This is important. Of course we need to do weighing. That's the point of the voter speeches, right? Impact weighing is you can't make new arguments, but you can frame arguments in new ways. That's the point of the speeches. Without there's no fairness, and negative would always win because the affirmative doesn't know what's important to frame until the PMR, which actually means that the fairness goes the other way. Here's next one's the advantage. So basically, there are a few things here. The first thing they say is that Boeing is a small company. It doesn't matter. But Boeing isn't small. In fact, this was literally their example of big companies that own the pockets of Trump. That was the only example. Next, they say this Rex Tillerson thing. Now, the overview on the advantage actually is that their uniqueness is from last December. It's completely out of date. Rex Tillerson is not in the cabinet anymore. You also see that they say Trump hasn't actually followed through on tariffs. Trump has imposed tons of tariffs. He's imposed tariffs on solar panels and washing machines, and he's imposed a ton of steel tariffs. And they say China hasn't done anything. Guess what? China imposed literally thousands of tariffs on consumer goods that we are selling to China, on agricultural goods that we are selling to China. There is a trade war happening right now. They say that Trump doesn't follow through. He has followed through on this. The wall doesn't matter. The fact is that he has started a trade war, and there is a trade war happening right now.
He pushed tax reform through.
They also can see that he pushed tax reform through, which proves that he can do things. But next they say that, they say they won't follow through, but And then next they say the tariffs are meaningless because they're very small. The tariffs aren't meaningless. One tariff might be very small, but they add up. There are literally thousands of tariffs going back and forth at this point. Next they can see that the US will join. This is literally the biggest impact scenario in this round. They say that our impact scenario is tiny because it only includes $4 billion. But guess what? That's not true. that's an example of what one tariff does. Think about the amalgam of all the thousands of tariffs that we put on China and all the thousands of tariffs that they put on us at this point. That adds up to more than $4 billion in wage growth loss.
Point of order.
Yeah.
The specific articulation that there are multiple tariffs that are instituted that then sum up to being a large amount is new in the LOR or PMR. The argument that was made initially was that the tariffs amount to $4 billion.
No, that's not true. The econ scenario out of the PMC was that trade war leads to economic collapse. And that this is a specific example of how TARF does that on a small scale.
The $4 billion was from 2004.
Yeah, I literally said economic collapse in the PMC. That was the impact scenario.
Yeah, I'm saying the articulation that small tariffs add up.
Wait, so you're specifically saying that it's these tariffs that add up to more than $4 billion from 2003 to 2004 is what
that was the argument out of the PMC was one tariff and reduces wages by $4 billion. So all of the tariffs.
Any one tariff, not like a specific tariff.
That was an example.
There was a steel tariff.
There was a steel tariff. The point is like.
Okay, yeah, sure, whatever.
That's like really good.
Just need to know like what the
It's like
right.
blatant idiot.
So they can see that a trade war leads to economic collapse. They say that our impact is tiny. It's not tiny. Economic collapse between U.S. and China spirals out to the world economy. They're also the biggest economy. So this is going to outweigh the trade war on the disadvantage. This is the biggest impact in the round. Because if you believe that China will join, or they can see that U.S. will join the CPTPP in the world of the plan. But on the disadvantage, Japan can't afford a trade war. They've never been in a trade war. But even so, even if you buy the disadvantage, the advantage still outweighs. There's no link to the disadvantage because Japan will never start a trade war. But even if you don't buy that, the advantage still outweighs. The plan still solves better than the counterplan.
Good debate.